we start with the North Carolina and Minnesota game. Now, this wasn't maybe the most entertaining game of the weekend, but this was a strong performance for a few different people that we'll go over. And it ended up with a comfortable win for North Carolina, but this game was not out of hand until late in the fourth quarter. And the biggest thing that you have to note for Minnesota is mostly the mental mistakes. When you look at the turnovers, the drops, the busted assignments, that's really where they got killed. And when we talked about it in the preview, this is a team that could hang with North Carolina as long as they played a relatively fundamentally sound football game. And for the most part, in the at least for I'd say a good chunk of the game, they did that. They were swarming to the football. Their front seven was getting good pressure. They were getting penetration against North Carolina. There were just certain plays that they let up that obviously hurt them immensely. There were a number of big plays that hurt Minnesota. There was a play in which they subbed almost everybody, or maybe they did everybody. I couldn't count because that's how many people were running in and out. And North Carolina took advantage of that because they didn't sub, so they didn't have to wait. And then there was a wide open receiver running downfield. So I think for Minnesota, the biggest thing is we've talked about coming into this year that Minnesota is maybe a team that you look at in 2024, and this was the perfect example of that. I think you saw a team that is still relatively inexperienced, a team that is learning how to play with each other, and a team that can play well. It's just that they have to show the consistency, and right now they just don't have that, but there's still an opportunity for them to grow and get better. And we saw a number of plays like that and we saw a number of opportunities for them to improve. Drake May's health probably will be in question for a few days now. He looked like he was getting, or he got hit multiple times. He got hit pretty hard. And at one point in the first half, he was lifting his left shoulder up like he was hurt. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I think that his ability to make plays with his legs helped North Carolina this game. Had he not been as mobile as he was, I think that this game would have been a lot closer. North Carolina really benefited from having Drake May be able to run the football, but it also meant he took a number of big shots and he took some really, really big hits. So that is something that I'm keeping an eye on for the rest of this week to see what happens going forward. But Drake May also played a big part in this game, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. The big plays. Simply put, North Carolina made them. Minnesota did not. That was probably the biggest thing that I took away from this game is that North Carolina was capable of hitting big plays down the field, and it helps when you have a quarterback like Drake May who can make some big throws. There were a couple of plays where Drake May makes a throw that not many quarterbacks can make, and if you're Minnesota, you kind of just have to shrug your shoulders and move on. You just can't expect anything to happen because Drake May is that good. And I don't think you have to hang your head over that. I mean, one of the first touchdowns, Drake May throws it in a perfect spot where only his guy can go get it. And even though it was good coverage, it still ended in a touchdown. There's really not much you can do about that. Again, North Carolina made those big plays. Minnesota simply did not. Minnesota made too many mistakes, and ultimately it hurt them in the end. And you simply can't do that against a team like North Carolina. The front seven for North Carolina was a matchup against Minnesota's offensive line that I talked about coming into this week of watching. That's going to be a big factor in this game, and it was. Now, the stats don't show that this front seven did a ton, but they were very disruptive. They were, I mean, Ethan Kaliakmanis was able to escape the pocket. It did not look good. So for those saying that Ethan is a good runner, he's a capable runner, but he should not be a feature point in the rushing attack. That simply should not be in the game plan. And you saw what happened. It is a guy who is running for his life quite a bit, and the pressure from the front seven for North Carolina played a huge role in getting them the ball back, making Minnesota uncomfortable, and that really forced their hand to be kind of one dimensional. Though they did run the ball, I think, really well at times. Darius Taylor is one of the more exciting players that we'll talk about a little bit more, but I think that North Carolina did a great job of limiting what Minnesota wanted to do, and it forced Ethan Kaliakmanis into tough spots that he simply could not escape. And when you look at what Ethan can do, I think that you're looking at a guy who is a very talented player. We just need to see more from him in terms of consistency, and he has to get a little bit more comfortable He's 11 of 29 passing today. And I think he was cramping at times, dealing with a little bit of maybe some injuries, but so was Drake May. But Drake May obviously played a better game, still threw two picks. So I think that this is where Minnesota did some really good things in terms of making Drake May uncomfortable, providing different looks that maybe he wasn't expecting. But Drake May also made some terrible decisions today. And that was one of the interceptions. He shouldn't have thrown it at all. And it resulted in an interception for Minnesota. It kept them in the game. And then we saw Drake May also make a number of throws where you're just like, yep, that's the difference in this game is that our quarterback can't make these throws and their quarterback can. And that's kind of what we saw. And it's not all on Ethan. I think that the lack of protection against that front seven was a big factor in that. And I think that Ethan is still a very good quarterback. I think that he'll be very fun to watch. It's just that you have to have a whole team effort, and Minnesota's not one of those teams that can rely on one player to make plays. They have to rely on everyone. Now, they did have some solid performances from individuals, but again, those individuals aren't going to win you that football game. North Carolina had some individuals that you could maybe see win you a football game. Drake May is definitely one of them. Nate McCollum had a big game in his return, 165 yards and one touchdown. He had a couple big plays for the Tar Heels offense. We already mentioned Darius Taylor from Minnesota. We'll talk about him more later this week. He's one of those players that you need to get to know him if you don't already. I know a lot of people don't pay attention to Minnesota football, but Darius Taylor is probably going to continue that tradition for Minnesota of 1,000-yard rushers. He was one of the most patient running backs I've ever seen, and he's a freshman. So he's probably one of the most patient freshmen that has ever played college football. Most freshmen probably just want to get downhill. They want to make a play, and they simply don't have the patience to let things open up. Darius Taylor almost waits, I don't want to say too long, but he waits quite a bit longer than a lot of freshmen to be able to find an opening, let the play develop in front of him. And that's really exciting if you're a Minnesota fan. Jack Henderson had a solid game, 11 tackles, one tackle for loss, one pass defended, one interception, cramped up about halfway through the game, but still had the ability to come back and make some plays. Power Eccles, same thing for North Carolina. I think this game overall, even though the score doesn't indicate that, was pretty entertaining. It was back and forth, two teams really trying to figure some things out. There were some mistakes made on both sides, but North Carolina comes away with the win, and Minnesota still has a lot to be excited about for the future. Maybe they aren't as competitive as they'd like to be, but this is still a team that has a lot of bright spots, a team that has a lot to look forward to, and this is a team that will figure out how to get the job done, and they'll be playing better towards the end of the year. They're a team that usually figures out how to build off of their momentum and learn from their mistakes. And they had some good things happen this game. They also had some bad things. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to learn from those and then move on.